Well, good afternoon. My name is
Hi
Pat
there.
Esgate,
Hello.
and I am the organizer of Ann Lister Birthday Weekend, and I am delighted that we have Ann Choma with us today. And first of all, Ann, it's my tradition. I have to get in my cheap promo. ALBW coming next year, April 11th through the 18th in Halifax. And of course, I couldn't be happier about having Ann with us today because Ann is a very major part of what started all this, Gentleman Jack. And Ann is the author of the companion book to Gentleman Jack, Season 1. And I hope you all have that. I'm assuming that you do. So, Ann, let's just get started right away. Most of the people in the audience and I myself came to learn about Ann Lister through Gentleman Jack. And then, of course, we all went down the rabbit hole into learning as much as we possibly could about Ann. But how did Ann Lister enter your life?
Well, we're talking 25 years ago. First of all, I want to say hello to everybody. And thank you, Pat, for twisting my arm today. So I'm actually here doing this. But yeah, it's nice to say hello to everybody.
Yeah.
Through Helena Whitbread's book, my friend was going to live in New York, and the last thing she did, before she left, was she gave me Helena's first book. And it was I Know My Own Heart. And I was in my 20s, my early 20s. And not quite sure of myself in the world at that point in terms of my own sexuality. And so I was handed this book and I just could not believe what I was reading. And so I took this book home, I Know My Own Heart, and it was Helen's first book of extracts, and it just spoke to me in a way that nothing else had done at that time. And so I sort of devoured the text basically and kept devouring it, and eventually got to meet Helen a few weeks later and wound up at Shibden Hall. So that was really the start of my introduction into Ann Lister, and just continued from that point on. I spent an awful lot of time with Helena in the early days. And
that must have been wonderful.
Well, it was, because for a start off, we had a lovely friendship, and Helena was very generous with her time, and she was generous with giving me information and copies of the diary sheets that she had, she would give me to take away to read, and schooled me really at the beginning, because like everybody else coming to the diaries for the first time, it's a scary prospect. And when you see the reading, and it took me a long time to sort of get my headspace into how she wrote and everything. But, for a long time, I just kept reading Helena's first book. I think everybody's got a first book or a first introduction to Ann Lister.
Yes.
Many people, it's Sally's Gentleman Jack. Today it is, but, for Sally, it was Jill's book. Right. For me, it was Helena's book. And right. For people today, I'm hoping they get something from my book. And maybe that's the first time they've read about Ann Lister.
Exactly. Yeah. And
I think it's you always remember that first time where you come to you get to know about Ann Lister. Yeah. I mean, I wasn't from Halifax. I was from Leeds, a city half an hour away. So I'd never been to Shibden Hall. Whereas Sally will talk about having experiences at Shibden Hall as a child. I never had that. I'd never even heard of it. Certainly not heard of Ann Lister.
Wow.
And so,
what was it like walking into Shibden Hall the first time?
It didn't take me long to get there. I think I got Helena's book, and I'd read Helena's book many, many times. And then within 2 or 3 weeks, I ended up at Shibden Hall one weekend. Yeah. And it was just, myself there. There was just nobody else there, because I got there very early, and it was a miserable Saturday. I think it was a Saturday morning. It was gloomy, but it was so atmospheric. And I could just wander around the hall on my own. Right. And there was a lovely guide there at that point called Tony Sharp, and he showed me around, but he kind of wanted to talk about John Lister, and all my questions were about Anne Lister. And so I just like picking his brain all the time. And he just couldn't answer a lot of the questions.
Right.
So then he said, you know, you need to meet Helena Whitbread. And so
there you were.
Yeah, Helena and I then got together and you know, started a lovely friendship and did really interesting things with Helena. I went to Paris. We went on a, you know, road trip, an Anne Lister road trip.
With Helena Whitbread?
Helena Whitbread, yeah. Oh, Helena.
Golly.
I mean, I was in my 20s and Helena was, I think, probably maybe 10 years older than I am now, but we kind of exhausted her, but we did everything we needed to do because she was still writing No Priest But Love at that point.
Oh my gosh.
So I was kind of, I suppose in a way, helping her with a little bit of research, but visually, you know.
Yeah.
And we were finding all the places she lived, doing what people do today when they come to Halifax and zooming around and finding these places.
Yes.
I've
done that in Paris myself, as a matter of fact. The last time I was there, I drugged my wife Brenda every place I possibly could from the addresses that I'd been able to find out of the, you know, all of the books. So it
really means something to walk in Anne Lister's footsteps.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so important to be able to do that, to visit the places that she visited,
yes.
and to make pilgrimages like some women are.
Yes.
And part of the feeling I had, you know, when I first got to Shibden Hall and many years after that, was that you know, there was no women there were no lesbians there. And I used to ask myself, where are the women? Why don't they know about Anne Lister?
Yeah.
And they just didn't, you know. And I remember thinking to myself at one point, this hall should be a lesbian mecca. It should be that place. And you know,
it is.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Thankfully, yeah. And
I had my own magical moment at Shibden Hall one night. The second time I was there, it was during Anne Lister Festival. And Brenda and I went up because at that time, and I think you can still do this, there's no gate, there's no fence around Shibden Hall. And you can go up in the evening and walk around the garden and walk up to Walker Pit. And I was out there walking around with Brenda and I saw these two women coming towards me. And I said, as they got close, I said, have you been up to, are you going to Walker Pit or have you been? And the redhead said, oh, many times. And then I realized that it was Sally and you. I don't know if you remember that. It was like, you know, late in the evening.
I really remember it. And it was really nice because I can't remember whether we'd started to transmit at that point in the drama here or whether it'd just gone to America and it was out there. But I don't think we quite realised what was coming, Sally and I. You know, that's probably a later question you've got, but yeah, it was nice. It was nice to see women start to arrive.
Right.
And
now they're there in droves. But you took a step from getting Helena's book and reading it. You decided to work on Anne Lister as part of your master's thesis, correct?
I did, and in a way, that was Helena being very encouraging, and I knew I just couldn't stop with reading Helena's book. I wanted to do something myself, and you know, I go back to that point, you know, where I was kind of struggling myself and about who I was and what place I was in the world as a gay woman, and I had not really, I don't even think at that point I'd even fully accepted who I was. And so I could not believe that Anne Lister, who'd lived 200 years ago, was living her life the way she lived it. And I just wanted to know how she did it. Because, I mean, you know, if there was a woman here in her early 20s in the 1990s who was trying to find a way through, a path through, how did she do it 200 years ago?
Yes.
So that's really that's the question I wanted to ask in the thesis. And it was about, you know, what kind of middle space did she occupy between this image of the proper lady and the sexually liberated woman? How on earth did she do that? And it was because she did occupy a middle space.
Yes.
She knew the benefit of hiding behind what she called a warm friendship, which would have been a romantic friendship. But she knew how to move into that other world where she could create spaces for herself, where she could be herself sexually with other women.
Yes.
And
so
it's all about that, really. It was exploring these different kinds of codes and how she adopted a masculine sensibility to be able to do that.
exactly.
She was looking at women through the male gaze, in actual fact.
Which is,
So,
boy, that's an interesting point.
yeah.
We'll get to that later, because it ties into a new question that I had put in here. But I did want to share with our listeners, Anne has been kind enough to share her master's thesis, which is entitled Anne Lister and the Split Self. And it will be up on the Anne Lister Birthday Weekend website after our conversation today. So those of you who would like to find out a little bit about what Anne Choma was thinking about Anne at that point in her life as a much younger woman, and a little insight there, it will be there for your reading. After you finished your transcription work and you finished your master's, what caused you to push on? Was it just you wanted to dive as far as you could get into Anne Lister, right? In terms of taking on the transcription yourself?
Well, yeah, I knew. I mean, I relied heavily on Helena's transcripts for that thesis, and although there is some of my own transcripts in there, you know, I was still learning how to read the diaries at that point, not feeling comfortable enough to just go out and do it all on my own. But I think I knew at that point I would not stop, and the idea was to actually continue studying. And I did do a lot more research towards what would have been a PhD, but it's never been. It never came. It just never happened for various personal reasons. I didn't go down that academic route.
Right.
And you know, I didn't stop ever being interested in Anne Lister. I mean, you know, Helena will vouch for that. And you know, by that point she was writing No Priest But Love, and so I'm still doing a lot of talking with Helena about Anne, and wanting to just continue. So I was very fortunate when Calderdale actually released some discs with does anybody remember a floppy disk? Because you know, the first Helena was working from these big photocopies, really blurred, and you know, that's where I learned to read initially, because Helena had loaned them to me. But then I got some discs, and I had more access to the diaries through the discs.
Okay.
I could just put the disc in and start reading.
Right.
Obviously, it's only just now we've got the digitized diaries, but it's difficult.
Right.
You know, reading those really poor copies of diary were terrible. So yeah, I mean, my interest never stopped. It never peaked.
Right.
Even though I went off and did other jobs and things like that, and I've never gone down the academic route. I never stopped being interested in Anne Lister.
But what an interesting Anne Lister life you have now led.
Well,
you
exactly.
Know,
yeah, 25 years ago.
Right.
I kind of knew that Anne Lister meant something to me very, very deeply, and I just knew somehow. I can't pinpoint. I can't even explain it, but I just knew that she was going to be some powerful force in my life.
Right. Yeah. So
Yeah.
Anne, how does it feel? And you can relate to this on a number of different levels. Now there are not just hundreds and not just thousands, but hundreds of thousands of women who have now discovered Anne Lister. There are certainly a large contingent of women who are actively transcribing the diaries, certainly doing as much research even outside of that as they possibly can. So now here you are, you've gone from this position of being one of the few people, yourself, Sally, Helena, Jill, who really knew something about Anne Lister. Now you're surrounded by this community of people who are very switched on to Anne. Is that intimidating in any way, or are you welcoming it, or what are your feelings on this gigantic community that's sprung up?
I mean, I think it's really exciting, and it was the big aim, you know, Sally and I had prior to transmission of Gentleman Jack, and especially Sally's dream was to make Anne Lister known, not only through Gentleman Jack, but through having, you know, women, anybody having access to the diaries globally.
Yeah.
So there was a massive push before transmission to make sure that all that was in place, and that as soon as transmission happened in America and the UK, that these diaries would be there for people to start working on. And, you know, it goes back to what I said all those years ago when the first time I was at Shibden Hall, you know, where are the women? Why don't women people know more about Anne Lister? I mean, politically, culturally, it wasn't the time then. And we all know that was struggles for, you know, the LGBT community back then.
Right.
Not, you know, we don't have the freedom that we have today to be able to express ourselves or talk about being gay. Like, you know, it was very different then. So, but now, you know, we've come full circle, and we've, through Gentleman Jack, through, you know, Sally has made Anne Lister global. She's pushed her out there. She's given her to the world. She's given her to lesbians.
Yes.
And I love it. I mean, I engage a lot with people on Twitter, and I try and encourage people to do it. And there's some fantastic stuff going on out there. I mean, I'm really, you know, it is quite daunting because now you know, there are people out there discovering things that we have not discovered, and killing some myths in actual fact.
Yes.
So it's got to be applauded, and there needs to be, you know, more engagement, I think, in terms of publications by women.
Right, and also from when you and I were talking the other day, we were talking a little bit about the research side of Anne Lister, and you had mentioned something about the fact that to you it was important that even academic research doesn't just sit in academia, but that that it enters into the community so that people know more about what's going on.
Yeah, I think,
yeah, right.
I had not so long ago, I met my professor who tutored me through that thesis, and she's retired now, and she said, you know, that there's a huge drive within at least British universities to push history and knowledge beyond the walls of the cloistered walls of university, and there has to be some kind of community outcome for all this very, very in-depth research that's going on within departments.
Yes.
And I think, you know, what's happened with Gentleman Jack and Anne Lister is that this is a fantastic example of it, because now, you know, her diaries are out there. Everybody has the opportunity to do something with them and learn about Anne Lister, and that has to be the ultimate aim.
Yes.
And I think, you know, I can't say speak highly enough of how Sally has changed. She's moved the goalposts on Anne Lister's legacy, because you know, if the diaries hadn't been digitized, you know, none of this would be going on.
Exactly.
Grappling for information from for tiny snippets of diary from the archives. So I think, you know, this community, it is a community out there now working on Anne Lister.
Yes, and what I find so interesting about the community is that obviously there's probably lots of parts to it, but if you can almost break it down into three groups. You have the fandom, the people who came to Gentleman Jack, and that's their main interest. They love this historic, little bit of sort of fictional piece to it, the romance, the whole thing. And then you have, on the other end of the spectrum, you have the academics, the researchers, the people who really have dived way down into the history. And what's really wonderful is this group of women in the middle, group of people in the middle, who kind of dive into both areas.
And I think I'm like that. I find myself occupying that middle ground. I don't class myself as an academic, and I don't class myself as a cloistered kind of historian person. I'm just somebody who loves reading Anne Lister's diaries, who's been lucky enough to be able to do something with them through Gentleman Jack, and realising a dream that I've been able to write about her. I've got to mention my wonderful colleague Stella Mertz, who was my editor on the book, and you know, I baked the cake, basically. I baked the Anne Lister book cake, but she put the icing on top. So thanks, Stella. And she deserves all, you know, as much praise as I do, because, you know, that's what fantastic editor. And
that's a lovely way of putting that.
Team, really crucial part of the Lookout Point team, amongst all my other buddies there. Yeah. But I think, one person doesn't make a book, and
right.
there. So
It's a lovely way of putting it in terms of baking the cake and her putting the icing on. Speaking as both a writer and an editor, I can't agree with you more about the importance of good editing. It's
oh yeah. I mean, I wrote far too much for that book. You know, it was just too much detail, and we had to lose an awful lot of it, which was sad. But you know, it's never, as Sally said, you know, any Ann Lister research is never wasted. So
well, there you go. Right, yeah.
you know,
So one of the things that's really so wonderful about your role in the Ann Lister community is when we talk about that pantheon, that the canon of Ann Lister that's available right now, and the people that we know the best who have been writing about it, you're the only lesbian that's really writing about it. And it gives you, I think, you have the opportunity to see Ann Lister with a different eye. So I'd like to kind of move into a section where we talk a little bit about Ann and your experience of Ann. And one of the questions that comes up very often when all of us read through all the different books, there's a few writers that have described Ann as manipulative. I'd really like to get your take on that. What do you think about that?
you know, this is why we need, you know, an authorized edition of the fully transcribed journals, because it's only when you put things into context and you read the context around extracts that you get the full story. And we know we've still got a lot of work to do on that. And each author is going to have their own take on Ann Lister. You know, for every reason that somebody might say Ann Lister was manipulative, I can find you another 20 examples of why she wasn't manipulative. Mm-hmm. And you know, the way I see Ann Lister is I see her more as a person who, I don't like the word manipulation. I like to see her as somebody who liked to manage people's expectations, including her own. And she was very good at that. And she knew what her place was in the world. And, you know, people talk about financial manipulation. Again, you know, I can find 10 arguments to put that one to bed. And she, you know, if you think about the things she did with Via Hobart, and she tried to arrange or get involved in a marriage settlement for her. She was instrumental in trying to become involved in Mariana's marriage settlement after she'd married Charles Lawton, because actually Mrs. Belcombe had cut Mariana Belcombe out of any family will. And so she had nothing to come from the Belcombes, did Mariana. Of course, Anne made herself very unpopular for becoming involved in all that. And Mrs. Belcombe, Mariana's mother, she, well, unfriended her basically for many years. And it was a very touchy kind of relationship between them. I mean, Helen's the expert on that. And again, with Anne Walker, you know, this idea that she took all the money and she used all the money. Well, if you start to read the diaries from sort of like 1836 onwards, you'll see that Ann Lister was borrowing money from everywhere, and actually the portion from Anne Walker seemed minuscule in the end. But you know, Ann Lister was operating at a moment in time in her life, and she wasn't doing anything different than any other woman of her status was doing. You know, she was operating within those bounds of sort of like, it was always prudent to make a good match.
Yes.
And, you know, women had to look after themselves, and she was looking after herself. But I think, you know, it's a tricky one, and every author who writes is going to have their own take on Ann Lister. But I think one of the nicest things that somebody said to me, in actual fact, it was a criticism of the book, and I actually took it as a compliment, which was good, because somebody said that I was too sympathetic towards Ann Lister. And I thought, well, you know, actually I probably wrote that book with that in mind. I wanted to show a different side of her. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I mean, as a lesbian writing about Ann Lister, I think maybe she does speak to lesbians well, she does. She has to speak to a lesbian in a different way than she would to somebody who didn't have those kind of experiences.
I think that was the hardest thing for me as I was reading some of the other authors, that I found myself reading the passages and reading what, there's one in particular, what they had to say, you know, a comment like Ann Lister was a beast of a woman. It really felt out of sync to me, because also being a gay woman, I was interpreting it a completely different way. And one of the things that I found really interesting that you and I talked about in our conversation is you talked about how Ann Lister actually, in what some people might have called manipulation, she knew how to make her women feel safe so that within the boundaries of their relationship, they could feel safe. Can you expound on that a little bit more?
Well, yeah, I think, you know, it goes back to my thesis actually, because, you know, if you think of how she kind of occupied those spaces, Ann Lister, where they were safe for her women, it was because they looked up to her. She was almost like, Ann Lister used to quote, she had this idealistic image of woman. She couldn't fulfill that image, so she displaced that ideal onto other women. And they kind of, I think my interpretation is that the women that Ann Lister was with respected her, and they went to her for advice, and she was, you know, even beyond being lovers with them, they became friends with her, and
Right.
She was always highly esteemed. So I think there was that level of respect with Ann Lister from the other women, so they felt safe with her.
Right.
You know, of course, their privilege as well and their class positions enabled them to have these very, very nice spaces where they could be, and it's as simple as that, really.
Yeah. That's kind of the way of the world in any case, I think, right?
Yeah.
It certainly isn't something that we've escaped by any stretch of the imagination. I'm sorry, I want to move on to another question. You're still actively working on the transcription of the diaries, and you're focusing, you told me the other day that you're focusing on the time after they took the sacrament together, because of course that's where we're going with Gentleman Jack. What do you see as the biggest challenges facing Anne and Anne moving forward now that they've taken the sacrament?
I mean, as a couple, you know, Anne Walker suffered with mental health issues, so that's a big issue throughout the rest of their lives together. But do you mean in terms of where we go with series 2?
Yeah, or well, actually that, or what you're reading when you read the transcriptions, when you see them interacting together. Yeah, it could be either.
I think basically, you know, you have to think about the magnitude of what Anne Walker did by moving into Shibden Hall with Ann Lister. And how Anne Walker was really the only woman who had the courage to do that eventually.
Yeah.
You know, and so there they were at Shibden Hall now as a couple, and getting on with their lives, and it was really like, I suppose, any two new people moving in together and negotiating their way through a new relationship. But of course, they had all these other constraints coming at them, and all these other pressures from family, and mistrust of Ann Lister and her intentions towards Anne Walker. So I think, you know, the challenges they had are very human for anybody embarking on a new relationship, but they were doubly harder for them because, you know, they were living in the mid to early 19th century where, you know, gay women had no place in society. So, and of course, you know, I know it's a question that's coming, the transition that Ann Lister was making in her life at that point, and which is very clear from my reading from, well, really from 1830 onwards, that there was a gradual transition for Ann Lister wanting to build this dynasty at Shibden Hall. So their relationship is kind of in and amongst all of that too, and this reinvention of Ann Lister post Via Hobart.
Right, where she kind of puts the romance down, she puts that aside, and decides that it's time to get on with her life and create that home for herself, that estate in Halifax, and went on about her way doing that. So let's talk a little bit about, let's move a little bit onward to your big focus right now, which is Gentleman Jack. I'd like to talk a little bit about the fact that you're in a a really unique position of someone who's transcribed the diaries and then also being involved in this entertainment piece. Tell me something. How did Sally Wainwright come into your life?
A few years after I met Helena, actually, it was through Helena that I met Sally, and Sally at that point in time was really wanting to write about Anne Lister. So it was about 2000 and about just the millennium. I think it was about 2000, 2001, something like that. And I think, you know, we know that her inspiration was Jill's book. And so, you know, she was very, very much into Anne Lister herself at that point and had a history of Anne Lister. She grew up in the area. I hadn't, but we met and we became friends instantly and recognised, you know, that we were both Anne Lister acolytes in a big way.
Right.
And by that time, Sally was an extremely successful TV writer.
Yeah.
And
that must have been sort of a thrill for you, wasn't it?
It was. I was in awe of Sally. I had a major girl crush on Sally for a long time. I only told her that's not so long ago, but we just laugh about it now because, you know, I really was in awe of Sally, and she'd had this hit TV series, and now, you know, I was kind of socialising with her, and we were going out for meals and things and talking about Anne Lister. And, you know, I remember one time we were all in a restaurant with Helena and Sally and myself and a couple of other people, and we were just yapping about Anne Lister and talking about different things, and we all got up and just forgot to pay the bill. And we were just outside, and this waiter ran outside was thinking, you know, who's actually going to pay for this food? Some nice memories, but initially it got serious when we had this idea that there was a project ongoing to try and transcribe the diaries.
Yeah.
And I think there was about 7 or 8 of us in it, and I think Sally, actually, typical Sally, she did an awful lot of work and was completely dedicated. Whereas I think, you know, and Helena, of course, too, but I was dipping into it at that point, and I'd started another job. I think I was doing something really exciting, like being a technical author for a computing company. You know, Sally was writing these amazing scripts, and I was editing some management journals for this university press. So I was doing some really not exciting stuff.
No kidding, yeah.
When I met Sally, I kind of like, you know, lapped up her time, so yeah, that's how I met Sally.
I think you just caused about 500 women out there to suddenly imagine coming into a restaurant and seeing you, Helena Whitbread, and Sally Wainwright sitting over in a corner, right, talking about Anne Lister. That's kind of like entering the Greek temple or something. Tell me a little bit about your role in the production, Anne. What's your title, and what do you do on a day-to-day basis?
I mean, my role is as advisor. You know, I didn't want to be called, I was kind of clear at the beginning, I didn't want to be called an Anne Lister historian. I just wanted to be an advisor to Sally. And so that's my role, you know. I think, you know, because I have been the lead advisor on the set, doesn't mean that you know, I'm any better than, you know, what Jill or Helena or anybody like that. It's just that
of course
I spent all the time with Sally and developed a very, very special relationship throughout Gentleman Jack. It wasn't just about transcribing diaries. I think when you advise somebody for a major TV series like that, and you work very closely with them. So it's about certainly for me and Sally, about providing emotional support during that writing phase as well.
Yeah.
And you know, I mean, Sally's been very generous about the role that I played, and I said to Sally the other day, I said, you know, I was looking back through the email threads of that first pre-filming and all the research and throughout the transcription, the email threads between me and her and the things we talked about Anne Lister. And we had the most amazing, fascinating discussions about Anne's identity. And I said to Sally, you know, those email threads alone would make a fantastic publication because we went into such detail.
Did you keep them?
I have got them, yeah, probably.
You should transcribe those for sure.
But it was a really close working relationship with Sally.
Yeah.
And with all, because anybody who's worked on Anne Lister's diaries knows how difficult it can be to just manage the material.
Yeah.
So when I came I mean, Sally started transcribing herself at first and realised that she couldn't write and transcribe. So when she phoned me and said, "Can you do it?" And I said, "Well, just give me 3 seconds to think about that." Because, yeah, I could do it. But she says, "Okay, then you can do it." She says, "But you've got to have done it yesterday," meaning we need these transcriptions. So I had to race through these transcriptions and I recorded them just neat from the diary. And then they were typed up at Lookout Point. But at that point, we didn't have the digitized diaries. So I was still working from grainy, not very clear, diary pages from a deck. And so, I mean, all my transcripts are recorded, but I have them printed out, but I'm still proofreading them now because I actually didn't type them up. So, but yeah, it was a really exciting time.
So here you are, you've, excuse me, you've had a portion of your life dedicated to learning about Ann Lister. You've gotten to know Sally. You're involved in the production of it. What was it like for you to see Ann Lister come to life? And what was it like for you to see her come to life in Shibden Hall?
Oh, it was amazing. I spent a lot of time researching and sending stuff to Saran, and having this vision, starting to have this vision of Saran in my head as Ann Lister. And I know Sally says that when she started, she couldn't see Ann Lister until we'd got Saran on board. And as soon as she started, then whenever she was writing a new episode, she immediately was thinking of Saran as Ann Lister. But it was amazing to see Anne come to life through Saran's portrayal of her.
Yes.
And worked very closely with her in terms of finding things out for Saran, simple things that would give her links to really get to understand her identity. And I think the first research document I ever wrote for Saran was titled Ann Lister and Sex. And that was the first document she got from me, because I thought she really needed to understand, where Anne was coming from and how liberated she was in terms of her body and some kind of constants in her sexual identity that I thought would be useful for Saran to have. And we had some really interesting discussions around that. But, the physical things that Saran brought on board, the walk, the talk, that was all up for discussion. And we had lots of discussion about that.
Right.
But once Saran dressed through Tom Pye's brilliant costumes, it took on another persona. She took on another persona and she became Ann Lister. So yeah, it was really special to see it fine, and it helped me with the book because I could see, Sophie and Saran as Anne Walker and Ann Lister reenacting these amazing episodes from the diary. It helped me visualize parts of the diary in a new way when I was writing.
Yes, yeah.
So that was fantastic.
How wonderful. Now, Anne, you didn't tell me about this document that you'd sent to Saran the other day when we were talking, and so I'm going to ask you a question that you're not prepared for.
No, don't do that, please, Pat.
Is there any possibility you could share that Ann Lister and her views on sex from the eyes of Ann Choma?
Well, it's very simple. She believed in, she was good at exploring her own sexuality and her own body, and she wasn't frightened of doing that. So, she even, we know through her reading that she tried to find out more about her oddity, as she called it, her identity through classical literature. But I mean, she was really into just discovering more about her own body.
Right.
And so she was comfortable with her own body and what it could do and what it could feel.
Right.
And, she was liberated in that respect. And, I really do want to actually write something about Ann Lister and her sexuality, as in sex, not physical sex, because I think it's really important. And I think that's one of the fantastic things it's one of the major things that why Ann Lister is so special, because we have all this writing in the first person about women having sex together.
Yeah.
And it's probably one of the biggest things, and it's what makes her very unique.
Right. And that's what makes your point of view on it so unique, because you're writing it from the point of view of a gay woman, which is why I asked you if you would want to share that. you had an intimacy coordinator on set, and you worked closely with her as well, right? In terms of some of the, well, a lot of the scenes. You specifically told me about the scene with Mariana, that you and Ida had a conversation. Can you share a little bit of that?
Yeah, that's the the first sex scene between Mariana and Anne in episode 1. And I just have a distinct memory of being with Ita in London, and we were actually going to be meeting that same, I think the next day we were going to be meeting Lydia, we were going to be meeting Saran and Sophie, and with Ita and Sally, and we were all going to be together in this room, and we were just going to be talking about, you know, sex and Anne Lister and sexuality and everything. So that's my conversation with Ita came before that. And Ita O'Brien came with all the scripts, all the sexual scenes within the scripts, and we talked through them. Wow. And I just remember thinking, you know, we talked about that first scene in particularly about where Anne's behind. She's like, you know, she's behind Anne Walker.
Mm-hmm. Or Mariana.
That would be a powerful image to see for women.
Yeah.
Sorry, Mariana. Yeah, not Anne Walker. But it was always led by Sally's script, because, you know, at that point Anne wasn't happy with Mariana. It was a sexual encounter where Anne was kind of just going through the motions, and I just remember having the conversation thinking it would look sexy and it would look good if Anne was behind Mariana.
Mm-hmm.
But it still maintained that level of distance where she wasn't really that quite engaged.
Right.
So, but I mean, Sally did wonders with it. You know, she did her own thing, of course, in the filming of it. And I had lots of fantastic discussions with Ita, and I did probably share quite a lot of my, you know, personal stuff with Ita privately, and yeah, that's what I was there for, and
right.
I hope it impacted. But many of the sex scenes, you know, we had big discussions around them with Sally and Saran and Sophie, and what they wanted. It was fantastic. You know, it's all post #MeToo, you know, and all that kind of stuff. So it's really important that, you know, there's some open discussions about what people felt comfortable with.
Right. You know, there's something else that happens in, well, first of all, I want to say something about that, which I don't want to miss the opportunity to say this. I think that one of the most amazing things about Gentleman Jack is that it absolutely was not filmed for the male gaze. It was, watching Gentleman Jack for me was a wonderful experience, because I wasn't seeing the usual stuff that we see when we see movies about lesbians, because it's filmed by men, it's scripted by men, and it always focuses in just on particular things. Whereas Gentleman Jack really gives you kind of the whole picture of the emotion that's behind it. It's very subtle. It's really beautifully done, and I want to congratulate all of you on that. It's really it's unlike anything else that I certainly have seen. But something else that shows up in Gentleman Jack that I found fascinating was how Anne always looks around to make sure that someone can't see from a window, or a door isn't going to open, or whatever. And I don't think there's a gay woman out there who has not had that very same experience.
Yeah.
Right today, right?
Yeah, don't we all have to double check about where we are so that we feel safe?
Yes, yeah.
You know, it's certainly no different for Anne 200 years ago. And even today, you know, even though we're out and we in sort of the modern world, we can be as we want to be, and we can hold hands with our girlfriends or our partners, whoever. But you still have to think, you know, is this a safe place to do it?
Yes.
I think we got something of that. We certainly got something of that in Gentleman Jack.
Did you bring that to the discussion, or did that kind of rise organically, or what was?
It was an organic thing, and through Sally's brilliant direction. But you know, I remember I spent a lot of time with Sally and with Belinda O'Hooley and Heidi Tida and my friends, and you know, and we'd have evenings out where we would talk about things like this. We'd talk about what it was to be a gay woman and what it must have been like for Anne Lister, but you know, about being a butch woman and how she would have stood out and how she had to negotiate that. So I remember having some really fantastic conversations with Belinda and Heidi about that. So I think, they were kind of it was all part of this kind of thing that Sally wanted to do, was to immerse herself in that kind of conversation.
Yeah.
So I think it would have, Anne Lister had to be like that. She had to be careful. She was discretion was her middle name.
Yes.
We know she kind of threw discretion aside foolishly on occasion, very occasionally.
Yeah.
Priestley, for one thing, walking in, although she wasn't invited, but she felt she was safe in Anne Walker's home, but she wasn't.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a common thing, isn't it? Even today, it's a universal feeling that you still have to be safe. And
that little touching of the hands after they took the sacrament was especially familiar, because we still do that.
Of course,
Yeah.
It's that's such a wonderful touch, isn't it?
Yeah.
In drama, it's a really special. Well, the whole episode is amazing, but that little touch speaks volumes, isn't it, about their situation and how many gay women can associate with that.
Yes. Yes, it's something that we, watching that, can identify with, and we can also feel the difficulty of, and we can feel there's a little bit of sadness that they're doing this, but it just is it's really just a wonderful touch. There was another thing that I wanted to touch on really quickly with you, because it really was special. You were filming at Shibden Hall. You had the whole cast there. And I asked you when we talked earlier about whether or not you had any special experiences while you were in Shibden Hall, about how it felt to have Anne Lister sort of present there during the filming, if you had that experience.
I did have, I felt like I had a major experience at one point in imagining Anne Lister being Anne Lister. And it was one day when we were about to break for lunch and all the crew had gone. And Sally and Saran held back because Sally wanted to talk to Saran about something. And Saran was still, full Anne Lister dress. And this is one of the loveliest things about my role, is that I could be involved in those little conversations prior to the scene being filmed. So I'd go in and sit on a tiny rehearsal, be just me, Sally and Saran, or Sophie, whoever in there, before we started to shoot.
Wow.
But I think this was just after that, and it was about before we were going to go for lunch, and Sally had finished talking to Saran. I was left with Sally, and we were in the North Parlour at Shibden Hall. The sun was shining through the house body. It was just a stunning day. Sally had held back into the North Parlour, and I just stepped outside the North Parlour and saw Saran, the silhouette of Saran walking back through the house body, out through the back porch. It was peaceful, it was sunny, and I just, for a moment, I thought, is this what it must have been like to have Anne Lister in this hall? It had that kind of impact on me. Wow. And so that was the big one for me. And I really had a moment at that point, and I just kind of wanted Saran to stand there. I didn't want it to go off.
Right, yeah.
And she did actually, for some reason, she stopped midway between going from the house body through to the passageway. I don't know what she was doing. But I just saw this silhouette, and I saw this black figure, and I thought, I'm just going to revel in this moment and imagine it's there.
What an amazing thing. For those who are watching, if you haven't been to Shibden Hall yet, and if you've heard any of our other interviews, it has an amazing energy all on its own. And so for you to be able to be there and have this experience of sort of seeing Anne Lister in situ is just so phenomenal. What a wonderful thing.
It was. I know she wasn't Anne Lister, but for that moment, I imagined her as Anne Lister.
Yeah,
that was very special. And then Sally. I think Sally had many moments like that. She felt like one day when she was out filming one of the outdoor scenes might have been when Anne was in the field digging. I can't remember, but Sally felt like she felt Anne Lister was with her at that point.
Wow.
She couldn't explain it.
Yeah. And the same thing on the hilltop scene. She said the reunion scene at the end, that was one of those days that was beautiful, this gorgeous view off towards Halifax, and there they were on the hill. And I think both of you have said that you felt like she was there.
It's another magical, unbelievable day. That's unforgettable.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's a question coming later whether you want me to talk about that, but it was just all the gods were aligned that day, and Sally really pushed Sophie and Saran hard, you know, to get the best out of them. And it was an exhausting day, but it was a magical day. I cannot tell you how exciting it was to be there that day and to witness that coming together at the end, and the scream from Saran and the vista in the back. It's all as you see it.
Wow.
And
what a special thing you have to be able to do that. Anne, forgive me, but I don't think that our tech team and I talked about this. You had said that you were willing to go on a few minutes longer than what we had scheduled. And I know there's a couple of things that we really want to get to. So I just want Liv and Steph in the background to know that we're aware of the time, and we have a few other things that we wanted to talk about.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm just going to keep talking. I did tell you once I started, I could talk.
I know, and I'm perfectly fine with that. So, and today we don't have Ohuli and Tito sitting in the background waiting for us to stop. So
that's true. Yeah. But they're watching. I'm sure they're watching. I hope so.
Okay, so while I'm there, let me just make sure that I got everything that I wanted out of that. We talked about whether or not there might be, talking about series 2, first of all, I had asked you whether or not you had a feel for what the dramatic arcs were starting to line up to be. Well, obviously in season 2 itself, season 1 was a perfect dramatic arc. I'm curious as to how you see that happening in season 2, and if you think there'll be a season 3.
Well, you know, first of all, series 3, I think, you know, it's got to happen, hasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, we're quietly confident, you know, but let's wait and see. But yeah, I'm very confident about potential future series.
Yeah.
I hope that gives the fans out there something to think about and to be hopeful for.
Yeah.
Series 2, you were right, Pat, because series 1 we had this perfect dramatic arc. It was going to be post-Bea Hobart coming back heartbroken, you know, following through to meeting Anne Walker, developing Colpitts, and culminating in the taking the sacrament. We had prior to Sally writing, we had a massive brainstorming session in Oxford about where we wanted series 2 to go, and we were all completely united that this should be you know, a story that continued to tell Anne and Anne's story after they moved into Shibden Hall, but to, you know, I can't give any spoilers away, but it's to present them as a couple who are still negotiating their way through a new relationship, but to find the joy and the challenges in that relationship through storylines.
Yeah.
And so far, Sally's up to episode 6. And,
excellent.
She's about to start. I think she's almost coming to the end of that. We're then, you know, she's in the home straight for series 2. But I think, you know, I've read all episodes so far of series 2, and I can honestly say that fans are in for an absolute treat. There's everything in those scripts. It's an absolute joy to be able to read them and to be able to comment on them and to have some impact on them and to keep talking to Sally about them. And there's some moments of great sadness and some great hilarity. Typical Sally, you know, she gets it all.
Right. So the listeners at home, I can't wait to see Anne Walker sitting at the dinner table with the listeners at home, right? I bet there's some good things in there.
Oh yeah. Yeah, there's some great things coming. It's absolutely fantastic material to be had in series 2, and
I'm very excited about that. And is there going to be a new Anne Choma book?
Not for season 2, but I am writing something at the moment for publication. So I'm really excited about that, and hopefully that'll see some daylight next year.
Excellent.
I want to write another book. There will be another book at some point, and certainly for season 3, I would hope so.
Mm.
So
And this,
formulating all kinds of ideas about what that book will be. So yeah.
aren't we celebrating the 1-year anniversary of the first book?
Yeah, we're celebrating the coming up to a year. Well, just gone past a year of the publication of Gentleman Jack the Real Anne Lister. I meant to have one next to me so I could hold it up, but I haven't.
Well, just so you know, in the background, Steph has already put up a graphic that shows your book,
well
so
done. Yeah.
you're covered.
Yeah, I've got something really exciting to say though about books. That the book Gentleman Jack the Real Anne Lister is going to be translated into French.
Wow!
In a French translation by a tiny publisher, a devoted publisher who's falling in love with Gentleman Jack.
Excellent.
We've got a fantastic translator on board, and so that's going to be coming out fairly soon.
Oh, that's exciting.
So
well done.
If you can speak French but doesn't have English as a first language, it's another way through to getting to know a little bit about Anne Lister. So we now have a Hungarian translation, and then we'll have a French translation.
Oh, that's so exciting. You know, we have a number of French members in the fandom, you know, on the various Facebook sites. I just sent off some of their merchandise the other day, as a matter of fact.
Oh, that's fantastic. So I'm really looking forward to, you know, when that finally happens and we get the publication.
Yes.
I'm really looking forward to going to Paris because so much of Anne's life was in Paris and so much history there. So I'm really looking forward to going and talking about her at some point. Can I just interrupt? Because I want to show the fans on Twitter, you know, I have this book posted of that belonged to Anne Lister. So this is it.
Oh, wow. This is the one with the Père Lachaise cemetery?
Yeah, this is the book that that Sally gave me at the end of season 1.
Oh my God.
And it's got her signature and date in it. So it's a pocket book, and I just wanted to show, because there's my hand and there's the book. Yeah. So it's actually quite a tiny little book.
Oh, wow. I remember when you posted that on Twitter, and I was blown away by this, because first of all, because Père Lachaise is such a phenomenal place, and to think that Anne Lister walked through it just adds a whole new layer of interest for me there.
Yeah, it's a really fantastic special gift, and it came from an antiquarian bookshop in Edinburgh. Oh my gosh. And, we got a lovely note from the chap who we got it from, and you know, Sally gifted it to me, so it's a really special thing for me to have, and it actually sits on my desk here as inspiration all the time. So take care.
Oh, how wonderful. Well, so, tell me when you're going to Paris, because I want to come and just follow you around, just so you know. Okay. Now, there's a couple of things that we have to get through before we get done here. You've said that you and Sally have both spoken about the fact that if you could be transported through time and meet Anne Lister and have the opportunity to ask her one question, what would it be? Have you thought about that?
I have. Well, first of all, I know what it would be in the High Flyer from Halifax. I'd have already got on, as a 21st century woman, I'd have already got on the High Flyer in Halifax. And then the High Flyer would be just me in it, and they'd be going down to Shibden Hall and stopping outside Stump Cross pub. And then she'd be getting in her 19th century dress, and she'd be in her moment in time, and I'd be in mine.
Wow.
So I would be in this carriage, and I would have my tablet, or I'd have my phone, and I'd have the diaries on this tablet, and I'd be saying, Anne Lister said, look, I want to show you these. I'm from the 21st century. I want to be able to show you what we're doing with your legacy. I want you to be able to see these diaries here because you've changed lives. You've changed the world with your diaries for gay women.
Yes.
And I'd be telling her about all these new things that we had access to, like all the technology. And I think that's the kind of way I'd want it to be. I'd want to time travel back and show all these wonderful things that were happening now because of her diaries and her legacy that she left us. Yes. You
just gave me chills, by the way. Because you had not given me that answer when we talked the other day.
I think about it. We talked to Sally about it the other day, and Sally said, you know, would she actually deign to see us? Would she talk to us? And I thought, well, I have to think around that. I thought I'm going to have to be in that High Flyer before she is, because she might not let me in, you know, I might
Yeah.
not be good enough to talk to her.
Well, I'll tell you something. If you whipped out your iPhone, she'd be all over that.
Oh,
You
she
would,
would. And
right?
she'd probably be able to somehow trace back the origins of that engineering that was the precursor to the modern iPhone.
Right.
I'm sure she'd be able to do that.
I can just imagine. So we do need to get to our Q&A, but I have a cue for you first. And you have talked about that you've always felt a sense of privilege in being able to have personal insight and understanding into Anne's emotional life as a gay woman that others might not have had. So I'd like to close with this question. What has Gentleman Jack done to you? And what does it mean to you?
I kind of look back to, you know, where I started with learning about Anne Lister's diaries, and where I was at that point in my life, and being completely unsure for a long time and many years, you know, beyond that. And I think knowing that, you know, Anne Lister was going to be, some bizarre reason, was going to be very important to me. So to come full circle now, 25, 30 years later, to be part of this amazing TV program has spoken to me in a very personal way. And, you know, I kind of feel at last, you know, it's taken 30 years of my lifetime and 200 years of Anne Lister's lifetime for women to finally claim ownership of Anne Lister, gay women to finally claim ownership of her. You know, we deserve to have Anne Lister, and she belongs to us. You know, there's this question, who does she belong to? Well, actually, she belongs to gay women.
Yes,
and
she
we
does.
should be proud of that. And I'm proud of that, finally. I'm proud to be a gay woman. And, you know, I've lived most of my life very privately. And I've, up until, you know, two years ago, I'm extremely private. And of course, you know, the universe had other plans for me, and I wasn't going to be able to stay private. And so now I'm really I think I'm really embracing my sexuality in a way that I didn't. And so that is the gift that Gentleman Jack has been for me, and the community out there is just amazing, and I feel close to them, and you know, they've been extremely kind to me, and very, very, you know, it's been a moving experience for me.
Well, it's been a moving experience for all of us. And again, I'm speaking for the community. I know when I say, again, thank you for all that you've done to move this forward. Thank you for the role that you're playing in Gentleman Jack, but certainly also for the role that you're playing in our community, because you really are, that missing link between our community and the rest of the world. And I just can't tell you how much I appreciate you. And,
It's
certainly how much I appreciate you coming on today.
Yeah, well, it's been an honor to be thought of in those terms. And I'm just like everybody else out there. You know, I got to Anne Lister 30 years sooner than you guys did.
Yeah, lucky you.
Amazing to be part of this. And I still, every day, I pinch myself that Sally asked me. And I certainly don't take my role lightly, and want to keep doing as much as I can to promote Anne's legacy. Yeah. So that's what I do. And
well, thank you for that. And so we do want to spend a little time on some questions from the audience. They've been sitting out there very politely since they can't get to us. and we're going to start with, let's see, from Pamela Bretsch-Bessler. Did they film the scene where Anne begs Cuvier to take her on as a student in Paris? Is that going to be part of, was that scene filmed?
I don't think Anne does beg Cuvier to take her on. You're talking about the diaries, and will it find its way into Gentleman Jack?
Yes. I guess that's what she's asking.
Anne's introduction to Gentleman Jack actually came through somebody in London, and he was this chap in London was the one that said you should go study with Cuvier. When Anne finally got to meet Cuvier, you know, she actually explains to him that it had always been a dream of hers since she was 14 to study natural philosophy. So, you know, it was to answer the question, I'm not quite sure where that kind of idea that where Anne had to beg Cuvier to actually tutor her. I mean, Cuvier was like Saint Hilaire, was in awe of Anne Lister's knowledge.
Yeah.
And particularly, you know, Cuvier's adversary, Saint Hilaire, was just beyond excited about how clever Anne Lister was. And he said, you know, you have the knowledge. He was there was a conversation between the two of them. And he said, you know, your knowledge is something to behold.
Wow.
And so, yeah, so she's very critical the first time she does meet Cuvier. You know,
there's a shocker.
It's typical Anne, isn't it? I posted something on Twitter, you know, she's looking at his fingers and his nails and seeing how dirty they are. And it's a very, very visual depiction of the first lesson.
She has a way about herself in the world. Okay, this is from Twesty Jan. Are you going? Oh, we act that. We're going to write a companion book to Series 2 of Gentleman Jack. No, not right now.
And not for Series 2.
Yeah. Okay. This one is from the head of Team Mariana herself, from Chantel Smith. If you were able to have a dinner party one time with Anne, Mariana, and Tib together, which time frame of their life would you pick and why?
I think it would be initially when they all first met in York, and when they were very young, and just seeing them as young people, just seeing them as young women, and seeing them all interact together, and the petty jealousies that started to form when Anne moved away from Tib onto Mariana,
right?
And then I just want to observe them as a young group of women, and then I'd want to probably, if I can just expand on that, I'd want to see them again. Well, at least on two other occasions, at Langton Hall in 1820, for the house party, the famous house party, the naughty house party.
With Miss Valence?
Yeah, with Miss Valence. So I think I'd put the three of them together in those two situations.
Wonderful.
And I just say, you know, one of the most amazing things of when we were starting to film, just pre-filming of Gentleman Jack, when we were researching, when we had with Ita, Lydia, we didn't have Tib, but we had Lydia Mariana as Mariana, Lydia Leonard as Mariana, we had Sir Anne Lister, Sophie as Anne Walker, all in the same room together, sat on the same settee. It was like they were all together for the first time.
Oh, wow.
It was a really special moment.
Yeah.
Amazing. Maria Barlow as well, fleetingly in that room.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, she played Maria Barlow. It was very fleetingly at the beginning.
Now, and where did this little meeting take place? The real one, I mean, with the actresses.
The real one, in a gorgeous Georgian townhouse in Soho, where Anne used to walk. Actually, she'd have walked past it because it's on Frith Street, and so it's just a very, very beautiful old townhouse. It's also a boutique hotel, and it's like you're actually in this amazing vintage, real Georgian townhouse. So we're all sat there having this amazing chat with Ita and Sally.
What fun!
It's kind of nice knowing that Anne went up and down, and you know she would walk past the houses.
I'm gonna ask you about that boutique hotel offline because I want to know where it is because I want to stay at it. Okay, from Alison Kirchgasser. How did you and Sally approach distilling so much material from the diaries into the scenes chosen for this series? How did you distill all of that?
Yeah, well, it was the biggest hurdle. It always is with Anne Lister. It was for me writing the book. You know, how do you manage this voluminous and mammoth material that is so detailed, and you know every line pretty much that Anne Lister writes has some worth and some value. You just have to, you know, we had to make choices, and we had the broad story arc, the very clear story arc for series 1. So we had to work storylines from the diaries around that. And it did mean making some painful decisions and leaving out things we wanted to include. And
I'd love to see the cutting room floor for this. Just amazing. From Sifra Verheiden, Do you see Ann Lister as a feminist?
Well, my opinions of that change a lot. And, you know, the kind of immediate answer you'd think of is no, she's not a feminist. But by virtue of what she did in her life and what she represented, then can we not see her as a feminist by consulting her own happiness as a woman and leading a life the way she wanted to do it? That shows strength to me as a woman.
Yes.
She didn't, clearly, I mean, she didn't actively promote women's rights, we know that. But you know, I've come across some really exciting extracts which give some other indications about she was forming different opinions towards the end of her life about the treatment of women in society. And there's a particularly exciting one that she has with Lady Stewart. And she paints out very clearly the disadvantages that women have in society when compared with men.
It's you know, like everything in the Me Too movement, whatever, you know, things have to be taken in context, especially when you're talking over 200 years ago.
Exactly.
That, you know, she was born into the position she was born into, and to your point, I think when we look at the example that she made of her life, I definitely see her as a feminist icon.
Yeah. I think you have to. I mean, you know, she stands out amongst women, doesn't she, Ann Lister? She has a life that is unique for us to witness through her diaries, and think of the abuse that she went through to be who she wanted to be.
Yeah.
Isn't that feminist enough that you fight for who you want to be?
Yes. Yeah. And prevail.
And you see equality in that you should have those rights and feelings to be what you want to and love who you want to in life as well.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And again, in context, you really can't argue with that. Well, that's me saying that, but okay, then from Leslie Brown, what challenges do you think the production team will have to overcome when filming season 2 in the current climate with regards to actors and crew being in close contact? Okay, this is a pandemic question.
Pandemic. Well, you know, everything's on hold at the moment. We're all, you know, we don't know when it's going to start. We're hoping it'll start sometime this year. We're really, you know, confident about that. We just have to be extremely careful. I mean, and take as many precautions as we can. And if anybody's ever been on a film set, you'll know how many people are there at any one point in time. It's hard to imagine when you see a scene at Shibden Hall and you see, you know, at home with the Listers scene around the table, that behind the cameras in all the other rooms, you might have 50 or 60 other people. And, you know, so it's going to be trial. And I mean, life's a bit of a trial at the moment for people, isn't it? We've been forced into this situation and we're all learning from it.
Right.
But the big crucial thing would be to keep everybody as safe as possible.
Yes. Yeah. It certainly is a hurdle to overcome. And, you know, I think that I just, like everybody else out there, I hope that we get through this sooner than later. I hope that everybody's keeping themselves safe and respecting all of the social distancing required. Wearing a mask is a statement about being part of a community. And this isn't about us, it's about all of us at the same time. So being careful to keep other people safe as well as yourself, I think is a big thing. So on that note, Anne, oh wait, we had an extra cue. Has Tib been cast?
She might have been cast, yeah.
No spoilers today.
I think she probably has been cast by now. I need to check in with Sally about that. There's somebody in mind. There's somebody in mind for Tib, and she's going to be fantastic.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, and then I do have to ask this one more, and then we really are going to be done. This one is from Chantel again. What are your thoughts on Mr. Crew? And do you think Mariana just told Anne about him because she was jealous of Anne Walker?
No, I don't. I mean, I there's some really fascinating conversations between Mariana and Anne about Willoughby Crewe. And it goes back, you know, you can trace that back as far as 1827. And actually, Willoughby Crewe seemed to be quite an okay kind of guy. And he took Mariana, you know, situation in life with Charles very seriously in terms of the unhappiness she was feeling. And at one point says to Mariana, you know, Willoughby Crewe says to Mariana, why are you so unhappy? What's it all about? And she says, it's about my life with Charles. And actually at that point, Willoughby Crewe says to Mariana, you need to go spend time with Anne. So he seemed a kind of okay kind of guy.
Wow.
But Mariana Lawton at that point, from 1827 onwards, the trajectory of her relationship with Charles was dire, always was dire, but became more dire. And her need for Anne became greater as that she realised Anne was escaping from her. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I put that in inverted commas, escaping from her, but you know, it's lots of frank conversations between Anne and Mariana about Willoughby Crewe, and Mariana had no financial settlement of any. There was no great security in terms of money post, you know, in the eventuality of Charles dying. So Willoughby Crewe was definitely a possibility as a relationship for Mariana, and they talk about that quite openly, do Anne and Mariana, and it's a really an interesting period. And but you know, Anne says there's a point in the conversation where Anne says of Willoughby Crewe, but you know, it's not him I really want, it's you. Everything you say is right to me. I mean, you know, you say what's right for me, you know what's right for me, she says to Anne. And then you know, she's thinking, of course, Mariana's thinking that if she could be with Willoughby Crewe, she'd have some kind of financial security, because at that point, William Lawton had died, who Mariana was really actually relying on for some kind of financial stability.
Oh, right, yes.
In the eventuality of Charles's death.
Right.
So she, and Mariana, I don't know if people know this, but Mariana thought that if little Mariana, her niece, would marry William Lawton, then she would be secure financially in life. Charles Lawton's nephew. Of course, we know William Lawton died, so she didn't have that fallback.
Right. That strategic marriage, yeah.
Marriage thing again. And so, and then actually Mariana says to Anne, you know, if William Lawton hadn't died, I wouldn't be having this conversation with you. So that didn't sit very well with Anne. Like, you know, it's either you're looking to Willoughby Crewe for security, or you're looking for me now for financial security.
Right.
So it's a really fascinating period. But there's a really funny extract. I won't go on for too long, but Willoughby Crewe, you know, Mariana has a dream about Willoughby Crewe, and she dreams about him being upside down in a pond at Lawton Hall with his feet stuck up in the air. This really bizarre dream with a hat on his feet. So she's having these really bad dreams that she tells Anne about, and they start laughing. And so, yeah, it's kind of it's an ongoing conversation with Willoughby Crewe and Anne, and all these funny things that go on between them, and kind of taking advice. But Anne really doesn't want any part of making that kind of decision for Mariana about whether she should be with him or not.
Wow.
So that's my answer about Willoughby Crewe.
Well, Anne, you know, it's kind of a perfect place to stop by simply saying, come on, transcription. You know, it's that full transcription is such an important thing. Again, Anne, I'm so glad that you decided finally to come and sit with us and chat a little bit, because I know it means everything to the listeners out there. You've been phenomenal. And
I've actually enjoyed it, surprisingly. It's been good fun.
Oh, yeah. Good. Yeah. That makes me feel better.
And actually, just before we finish, we've got a special glass here, and it's got a heart on. Don't know if you can see that.
Yeah.
So that's for the fans.
Oh, brava.
And it's not gin either, it's water. But I might go for gin and tonic now.
It's almost gin time. Well, actually, it is gin time for you. So we're gonna close now, but before we go, I do want to let everybody know that we have another ALBW Live coming up on May 20th. And many of you may realize that May 20th is Anne Walker's birthday. And that that ALBW Live is going to feature two people who are doing a ton of research on Ann Walker, Steve Crabtree and Diane Halford. And what I have to tell you is, I've read it, I've seen it, and everything we think we know about Ann Walker is wrong.
Yeah, it's a must watch.
It is a must watch. You are going to be amazed at what you hear on May 20th. So, Ann, thank you.
Thank
You
you.
have educated us, you have entertained us, and you have changed our lives, and that is no small thing. So,
yeah, likewise. Thank you so much. Bye.